I realized this concept had been in the we part all the time. So I was always optimizing on the we, on connection, and I was taking too much of responsibility, which did not allow me, and that's the interesting, not only to step into the me, into my perspective and set boundaries and act in those boundaries, but it also did not allow me to step into the real us, because creating the us includes my perspective and your perspective and all the others. And the ability to switch between those perspectives is what I call multi-perspectivity, and is, from my perspective, the most important thing a leader at the top has to be able to do today.
You're listening to Inner Pioneers, a podcast for curious minds who want to understand how to navigate change, crises, or simply the call for something new. Join us as we dive into real stories of transformation and learn from leading voices in psychology, science, and human development how to move through inner shifts and seasons of change. I'm Christopher Kabakis, and now let's begin pioneering. Hello, everybody. Welcome. Today we have a very special guest with us, Constanze Buchheim. Constanze, you're the founder and managing partner of a rather renowned German executive search boutique company called iPotentials. And you're also advising the government on critical issues. Maybe for those who don't know, tell us briefly, what is executive search?
Executive search is finding and placing the right leaders in the C-level or in the advisory board. So basically, we find the next gen leaders.
It's like ChatGPT or Google for executives.
Yeah, well, a bit more sophisticated.
I can imagine. Okay. So, of course, it's all about inner shifts, about the turning points in people's lives. And with you, of course, we have a very interesting personality here today, like a founder, entrepreneur, consultant, manager. And so it's not an easy first question or second question, but it's an interesting one, and we see where it leads us. So if you look back at this long and storied history of founding and managing and advising, what were kind of crucial turning points or crossroads that you navigated, and how did you move through them and emerge out of it? How would you answer to this question?
Yeah, that's a big question.
Yes.
We could fill the whole session with it. So I guess what is most important is stepping out of the system somehow. So I grew up, as most of us, with parents saying you have to become a solid and safe job, and education and education system preparing us for working in a company. And I was working in, I was intending to work in the capital industry, and started there, and heard my inner voice right at once saying, okay, that is not the right place to be. And I applied to become the assistant of a founder of a company, because they were really honest in their communication, and I loved that honesty, and just followed my gut and my instincts there, and became the assistant of one of the most well-known founders back then, in 2006. Worked with him, Lukasz Godowski, and I really could feel that working with him kind of, broadened my perspective. I know that there was one moment when I was really in fear and saying, okay, and what if the market is breaking down and we cannot go on here? And then he was looking at me and saying, well, then we move to the next market. And I was like, wow, it's that easy. And this started changing the way I looked at things. And I realized, okay, there is a difference in looking at circumstances and how they affect us. And when I realized that I have a deep passion in leadership and people and cultural topics, I realized that I will not be able to do it in working for someone who is not focused on it. And I really wanted to create my own business and change the world by thinking about finding, creating the right leadership that is moving us to the next level. And this is basically how I decided to found iPotentials and my own company, which was part of a struggle as well, but we will come back to it a little bit later. And throughout my entrepreneurial story, I had a huge ambivalence with responsibility. And there was some part in me saying, I am responsible. I want to be responsible. I want to have my own company. And at the same time, there were some voices saying, actually, I don't want to be responsible. And being in a leadership position, in a leadership role myself, I always had this ambivalent fight. And then, because you were asking for turning points, I did a really special coaching in the mountains on the Mont Blanc. And I went there thinking about, do I want to be responsible or not? And then I had a really special moment where I was leading the group and I felt all the weight of being responsible for the people on the mountain in the snow. And I was like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. And there was fog everywhere. I couldn't see a thing. And then it was really like in a movie. Yeah. Then the sun came out, and suddenly I could see all the way. I could see where I'm going, and there was this fresh snow, and I had this feeling of oh my God, responsibility means I can lead the way, I can pave the way, I can give like my shoes to the snow, so to say. Yeah. My pace, my thoughts, my intention. And it's not a weight that they are in my back. They can help me from the back. So I really had this really nice feeling of responsibility is something great. And this is when I really, really, really stepped into being responsible and taking responsibility.
So leaving your imprints in a way with your own shoes. And this was when you had already founded iPotentials, or that was kind of in that period before, or was it in the first years of?
No. Actually, it was really late. It was really late. So I founded iPotentials in 2009, and I had this experience, I think, in 2021.
Okay.
So for years, while being an entrepreneur, I had this ambivalent feeling of, do I want to be responsible or not? And this resulted, this had effects on my leadership style because I was recruiting for my own company, and I tried to recruit people who are better than me, can take more responsibility from me, because I said, actually, I don't want to lead this. I don't want to be responsible. So I hired the best people. Yeah. And of course, they had the hardest time because I was running the company for 10 years already. And I had the market feeling, I had the understanding, I had the knowledge. Yeah. And it was unrealistic to think that someone could step in and rule out the CEO or the leading managing partner. And this is when I understood the systemic approach of organizations. If you're the CEO, if you're in the CEO position and you're deciding to stay in that CEO position, you are having the responsibility. And this is what I realized.
I remember in a previous conversation we had, you also say that your own personal realization process around your relationship with responsibility also informs today how you advise, coach, talk to leaders, because you have a special eye for how they are able to respond, able to respond. And I think you also point out when you feel that they're not living up to that claim or promise of responsibility. Is that right? So that actually this own personal process helps you with this role that you're having often in advisory and coaching.
Yeah. That's exactly the link. Because back then I realized that I'm having this hard time with responsibility because someone in my family did not take the responsibility he had while raising us, and this led to the situation that we as kids had too much responsibility for things that we were not responsible. And that was the reason why I had this ambivalent relationship to responsibility. Of course, I could do it. Of course, I could take it. But the 6-year-old girl still said, but I don't want to be responsible. And while I had been on the mountain there, I realized that this is my 6-year-old kid's voice. And I can decide now to follow that voice and say, I want to protect it, which would be okay. Or I could say, no, I'm grown up. I want to have responsibility. I take that responsibility. And I realized that if I'm the CEO, when I want to stay in a CEO role, I have to decide for the more mature position. Yeah. If I feel I'm following the kid's voice, that's completely okay as well. But then I should not be the CEO because my organization, our organization needs the person in responsibility in the position that is filled with responsibility. And this is what I realized. Yeah. And when I realized this, and there's a strong consequence in it, but there's also a gentleness in it. And when I realized that, I understood that this is true for any other leader telling me, I know that the organization needs this, but I am not this kind of guy. I don't want to do this. I can't do this because this is not me. And by having this process by my own, I said, that's completely fine, but the organization needs it. And if you decide to give it to the organization and you basically decide to learn and to grow, then you can stay, and then you should stay in a CEO position. But if you decide, besides the fact that the organization needs you, not to fill that role, that's okay as well. But then you have to leave that position. And this is so strong and so powerful for me. And I have actually no fear of talking to anyone. So when I'm consulting the government, when I'm talking to ministers, this is what I'm saying as well, because they have a role, they have a responsibility. And as you said, their role is to find answers, a response to the challenges that we see. And if they're willing to find this response, okay. If they are not, just leave the place. That really helped me to step into those positions. And this helped me in my company, because we are dealing with a lot of powerful CEOs and advisory boards and supervisory boards. Yeah. And you really have to act on an eye-to-eye level. And also in my consultancy for the government, this is really essential to say what is needed to create the change in the system. Yeah. And I really love doing that.
No, it's great that you get away with it as well. I guess many people don't like to be challenged, right? But they also don't like people who are just trying to please them. So it's quite ambivalent, right? I don't want to be criticized, especially not in public, but I'm bored or annoyed if people just repeat what I have said. So to challenge people in the right way, that they can take it, is not so easy. And it seems you're, because of your own personal history and the sensitivity for this issue of responsibility, ownership, you can be a great advocate, do advocacy for what the organization needs. And then what I heard was you managed to separate the role from the person. So you talk to the person about their role. And so it helps a bit taking the criticism maybe, because you reflect together about, okay, what is actually my role here? And do I live up to what maybe the organization needs from me here, but the company? And this way, maybe it's part of what you do. So to actually create acceptance for your challenge or the advice you give.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay.
That's exactly the point. Separate the role and the person. And the best situation is when the personality matches the role. But that's exactly what we have to reflect on and where we have to take decisions as leaders. Do I want to fill that role? Do I want to make my personality match that role and the requirements that are linked to it? And this is where you can add the gentleness from my perspective, because what I'm saying is you as a person are okay as you are. And there's no judgment and there's no whatever. I accept you as a person as you are, no matter how you are. But in a role, there are some requirements. And what I can judge on is the match between the requirements and what it needs. And this is exactly where we are judging.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. What I liked also about what you said is how I can see, or how people can, maybe also the listeners can see how like personal experiences in your childhood have shaped you and created a certain sensitivity around certain issues, such as maybe here responsibility. This then becomes a topic that you're working with. You said the ambivalence for many, many years, even while already being in the CEO, managing partner role and in the responsibility, struggling with an ambivalence around responsibility. And then resolving it somehow for yourself, getting this clarity, but after a whole process of working through it. So it gives like really depth to your knowledge and understanding of the topic or the field. And then use that productively in the world, like for your consulting, for your coaching and so on. So it comes all from like early experiences into professional experiences, our own process, and then leads into the gift we can offer to the world. I think this is beautiful, like how you just shed a light on this.
Exactly. But what is needed, and this is what I call mature leadership, and this is why I'm saying we need mature leaders who are reflecting on what's happening. Yeah, if I would not be aware of this ambivalence and would not think about it, reflect about it, it would somehow still have an impact and a power over me and over what I'm doing. And this unawareness of something pushing me somewhere derives the quality of me being as a leader, because I'm not fully aware of what's happening. And if I'm not fully aware of what's happening, I'm not taking aware decisions, like, or conscious decisions. That's the better word. And that's the one thing. And the other thing is that thinking about responsibility, like responsibility is basically a concept, and you can move on thinking about this concept further and further and further, because what happened then, like in the first place, was responsibility, yes or no. And I said responsibility, yes. But the next step then was, okay, I'm responsible for everything. And then I had to reflect about what is responsibility? What am I responsible for? What does responsibility mean for the we, for the me, and for the us? And really deciding if I'm responsible for everything. And that was another hard part of the story that came afterwards. So during the last 2-3 years, this was another turning point when I realized responsibility, yes, but I realized that I was taking forever, actually, basically too much responsibility, which was the reason I had this ambivalence. So it was really necessary for me to understand what is the me, what is the we, what is the us, and who's responsible for what. And I guess there is a step after it as well. I'm right in this step, but I guess there's another layer on this as well.
Okay. Yeah. So yeah, it's interesting. I think that's probably true with many issues. So at first level, it's like yes, no, and just like thinking a bit in a bipolar way when we first like deal with topics, and then it gets more differentiated. So now it's like, okay, what's my role? What's the role of the others? The me, the we, the us, and how to calibrate it properly. My responsibility, or maybe also ownership. I don't know if you distinguish ownership and responsibility. But to calibrate it properly and to find this balance each time anew. It's a practice almost. No, it's like not, it's decided once and then it's clear. It's like, it's a practice that we live into with each meeting or in each situation in a way. Would you agree, or how do you think about it?
Definitely. Responsibility for me is really like in the wording, as you said. So it's not ownership for me, it's responsibility. Because ownership is another important thing. But who is responsible to find the answer, basically? Yeah. And there was another turning point during my growth story when I learned, I did a coaching, and I learned about the concept of the rooms. Do you know that?
Maybe.
The concept of the rooms?
I know
So
some room metaphors.
basically,
Tell the listeners.
basically,
Yeah.
it was that I learned, okay, there's a room around myself and there is a room around the other person. And this room belongs to us and just to us. And if we're talking about relationships, this is what's in the middle of those two rooms. And what we're able to create and to change is the room in between us, the relationship. But it's not my responsibility to step into your room and to change something there or to ask you something there. You take the decision. And it's not my responsibility at the same time then to think your thoughts, so to say. For example, I'm not giving you a hard feedback because I'm afraid that you are running away. What I'm actually doing is I'm stepping into your room already because I'm saying, if I do this, you will do that, but you will decide what you're doing when I do that. And I don't know. Yeah. And that's the difference. So if I'm saying, okay, I give a feedback and I put it in the middle of our rooms, then you are able to decide if you take it or not. And it's just my responsibility to put it there. It's not my responsibility to take responsibility for all your actions that follow. That's your responsibility. And this is what I had to learn the hard way and what helped me a lot to um, step into my me part a little bit more. Because when I realized this concept, I realized I had been in the we part all the time. So I was always optimizing on the we, on connection, and I was taking too much of responsibility, which did not allow me. And that's the interesting, not only to step into the me, into my perspective and set boundaries and act in those boundaries, but it also did not allow me to step into the real us because creating the us includes my perspective and your perspective and all the others. And the ability to switch between those perspectives is what I call multi-perspectivity and is from my perspective, the most important thing a leader at the top has to be able to do today.
Yeah. All of this, what you said, speaks a lot to me. I think those ideas around multi-perspectivity apply both to personal or private relationships as well as to professional relationships. And of course, then the different layers like team and organization. So there's the I space, the you space, and the we space, for example, in a relationship. And we can ask, so not just what do I need or what do you need, but also what does the relationship need, which leads you down a totally different path. So what does a relationship need? It's like its own actor in a way, or its own entity that we can both relate to.
Yes.
And the clarity, I think it's very important. And sometimes people listening, they might have the issue of, similar to you, that they take too much responsibility and they're not so much aware about what do I actually need, for example. Just an example, but it might, for others, might be the other way around. They just think about themselves and forget about the we space or the you space. So I think people come from different trajectories in their lives and they have been shaped by different relationships in the past. And so they have a strength maybe in one perspective or maybe in two, but maybe not in all three. And so it needs to be consciously trained in a way, or it's a practice to be aware of this. As we said before, like in your conversations then with CEOs, you would say, so, okay, let's think together, what does the organization need? Right. And so this is basically, it's very similar to this, what you just spoke about.
And there are, so I'm getting passionate about this.
Good.
I love thinking about that because there are so many blind spots in Germany. So if we're talking to CEOs of huge companies, I would have expected that they're fully reflective and self-reflective and that they understand all the dynamics. Yeah. But what they basically understand is what happens really in facts in the organization. And when I'm talking to them, most of them think they act in the interest of the organization. But if you listen to them, you hear like I hear, that they're actually talking in their own perspective and that they're not integrating the us perspective. Yeah. And then being able to help to understand the difference. How does a decision look like from the me perspective in this situation versus how does a decision look like from the we perspective? Yeah. And making that difference is such an opener, an eye opener for most of them. Yeah. Because they think actually that they're acting in the best interest of the organization. So it's not a bad intention. It's the reflection about it. Yeah.
Yeah, to create like a conscious space where you can reflect on these matters, and with a sparring partner, I think is super valuable. Otherwise, we tend to maybe conflate our own interests with that of the organization, and it's not the same. It happens in politics also sometimes.
Yes, yes, yes.
And
Happens all the time there.
yes, and as you say, like mature leadership is actually that I'm willing to look at these things, right, together with other people and unveil what's otherwise hidden and not clear or conflated. And I think, yeah, so it's important to bring these things into a space of discussability, no? So that we can actually talk about it.
Yes.
This is your interest and this is the organization's interest and so on. Okay, now let's make an educated decision about what we want here. So to give the we levels a voice. Otherwise, they don't have, a voice,
Exactly.
right? So, yeah. And it might only come from the external, from the stakeholders then, the feedback otherwise, right? So they will criticize you because there's something off.
Yeah. And that's the reason why empathy and listening to your emotions becomes so important in the future. Yeah. Because if we want to take those educated decisions that you were just talking about, we have to integrate other people's perspectives, and not only in the organization, but because we're working in a global and complex world, and it is our task and responsibility to protect the whole world and not only our organization, then we have to integrate that into our perspective. And to be able to do that, we have to acknowledge that diversity in any kind of diversity, like or dimension, is necessary to take an educated decision, and that listening to intuition, so the things that you just realize are important and you don't know why. Because integrating your intuition does mean integrating all the knowledge that is in your body and system. Yeah. Using it as well in a very fast-paced, complex world as an intelligence system. But to be able to do that, you have to acknowledge that intuition is based on your experiences and therefore has an information dimension as well. And we have to integrate those informations as well. And this is something really, really, really new for most of the leaders, especially in Germany, because it means listening to myself, listening to my intuition, following my intuition, trusting my intuition, and integrating those of the others as well.
Mhm.
And that's so special. Yeah, that's so special. And it's necessary. It will become really necessary to be a really good leader, to integrate that. It's not just a soft fact.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And it also needs a kind of cultural change, maybe. So because often people would ask, how do you justify how you act now in the world, how you move? And then you need to give facts or something coming from the head intelligence, rational, analytical intelligence. But as you pointed out, there are other levels of intelligence, like intelligence systems, such as the heart, such as the gut. Maybe the intuition is kind of the gut, or is associated with the gut. You could also say it's whole body intelligence. And there's something that is tacit, kind of hard to verbalize sometimes. So you're being hard pressed to answer if someone says, like, how do you justify it? Do you have like scientific references for this hard data? But you say, no, I don't know. I have a bad feeling with this here. Like, let's see, no? And that can be valid information. Of course, it's not just for you to accept it or to integrate it, but also, of course, it's a cultural challenge.
And there is, like when I realized this, it's a funny story. I need to tell this as well.
Mhm.
I heard of the turkey phenomenon. Have you ever heard that?
I'm not sure. I know
No,
if
huh?
yeah.
Um, so I'm telling you this. So the turkey who was bought for Thanksgiving in the United States, he's bought alive and he's put into a cage and feed it for some weeks. And on the first day, when the owner opens the cage and puts some food in there, the bird is really anxious and full of fear because it's not a good situation. And there is this intuition, and then nothing happens. Yeah, and the next day, the door is opened again, get some food. This happens for weeks and weeks and weeks. And at some point, the turkey realizes, oh, if the cage opens, nothing bad happens. The problem is someday is Thanksgiving. So the situation changes, and the gut feeling, the intuition that was true earlier, yeah, is true and was true. Just by following the data of the last weeks, you could not tell what's happening next. The next day will not be the food day. Well, it will be food day, but for someone else. Processing just by data and taking your decisions just by data because it happened like that for the last weeks is not true anymore, because the actual world, the current world, is like there's another Thanksgiving day every day, so to say. So by just using the hard facts that are true for the last weeks, a month, is not valid anymore. We have to integrate intuition again to take better decisions. When I heard this turkey story, I was like, this is why we have to integrate intuition. We cannot just follow the data. We have to combine both. Yeah.
Yes, and I mean, and most things that are happening in the interrelational space, like so in groups and in teams, they also present to us on an intuitive basis. Sometimes I use the word atmospheric intelligence, or something like you have a feeling of something is happening in the space. And of course, there's no data on this. I mean, all the data wouldn't be very valuable if you could create data from analyzing people's behaviors.
Mm.
So because you said mature leadership before, also attuned leadership, we sometimes spoke about that, like kind of that we're able to attune to others, which is basically then helping with our intuition. It can help us, informs our reasoning then also, the head function. It's like another data stream, a level of data streaming that we can access, right? And I would agree with you that you said in Germany, maybe it's kind of often organized out, maybe. And we need to encourage people to let it in again. It's a capacity we have, right? But it's sometimes organized out. It's a missing experience for whatever reason, cultural or individual experiences, individual conditioning, or whatever.
Mhm.
Speaking about the personal, because I want to also hear more, or probably also our listeners want to hear more from you, from your personal story. We started out with the personal turning points, and you mentioned first studying in finance, capital industry, you said, and then realizing it's not for me, moving to entrepreneurship, Lucas, and then starting out on your own, building your own company, and you pointed to this responsibility theme that goes from the early days to now. And like our development is not just smooth and has nice turning points, but there might also be like moments that are perceived as crisis, right? Or like it's really a failure or breakdown or something really challenging. Were there moments in your life, or one? Can you give us one example of one of these moments, and maybe what it was about, and maybe what you learned from it, to really get to know you also better?
Yeah, of course, of course. I think life is about challenges and dealing with those challenges and enjoying the moments when we are not challenged. But both of it is life. This is what I learned and helped me to cope with it. Like my hardest crisis I had was so far in 2012. We had like 2 years of success in the company, and we had it all looked good for the first 2 years, and the market kind of evolved, thought it would always be like that, easygoing, and this is how it's in the future. It's just going up. So I invested. I changed the office, like bigger office, grew the team, and I became pregnant with my second son. So my first son was born just before I founded the company, and I was pregnant with my second son. But during that pregnancy, the whole market changed. Somehow our revenues decreased, and we could not pay the team anymore. We could not pay the office anymore. And I was pregnant in a 6 month. So kind of already had a time pressure, because I knew, like, going from now, there are 3 months, I will have to give birth. I want to give birth, of course. Yeah. But I also had to give birth then. So there was this pressure moment, and also like complexity adding, in our family. So everywhere there were challenges. Yeah. At some point we actually had no money anymore. So basically we had been bankrupt, and we had been cash flow financed. So we did not have any money, because we have a cash flow financed system. Basically, if you're not doing revenues, at some point you're running out of money. And this is what happened. It was really, really, really tough, because I did not really understand it, and I could not sleep anymore. I was in panic. I was really, like, from my level of security, this was not where I wanted, like, or I imagined myself giving birth to a second kid. Yeah. So I was really on pressure. When this happened, I was taking some advice from some friends and some consultants, and they said, you have to take a decision now. You have to take a decision now if you wanna fight, and if it's so important for you, that you're putting this in, or you give up, and you get a baby, and have a nice life, and you're not an entrepreneur anymore. And I've in that situation, I felt like, okay, why is this happening to me? Why is this not happening to anyone else? Why now? And I've really felt a lot of pity for myself. And at some point, I woke up and was in the situation of, oh my God, everything is not playing on my side. Everyone is against me. I'm in pressure, bad situation. Yeah. And then I said, it would be really easy to give up. And then I imagined giving up, not being an entrepreneur anymore, not being in this creation part anymore, being in this responsibility anymore. And I said, I don't want this. I want my potential's baby to survive. I really want this, and I will develop another image on what's happening now, and another perspective on what's happening now. First of all, I have to accept it. I have to accept that we're actually basically bankrupt. I have to accept the fact that the market changed, because until that, I have hoped, and I thought it will change, it will this. And I said, I have to accept it. So first thing was accept the situation. And when I accepted the situation, something really interesting happened. Then I started gaining a different perspective on it, because then I really can remember the day and the moment. I was like, oh my God, this is showing me something. That this actually happens is showing me that I'm still lacking a competence. Which kind of competence do I lack? Why could this happen? Maybe it's showing me that I was lacking a process. What is this showing me? And while thinking about what is this showing me, I found all the answers that I needed to change. Yeah. And then I still had 3 months to go. And then I was really pushing on those things and saying, okay, obviously my planning was not good. Obviously my financial part was not that good. And I added this with the help of some advisors that are hired. And I created a security for the time, like those 6 weeks around the moment of birth. Yeah. Then just 1 week before my son Oscar was born, like everything turned. Yeah. And then I gave birth to my son. And after 6 weeks, I found a partner I got into the company who will do it with me in the future, because I don't have to do those fights all alone. Actually, this moment of crisis, was actually really, 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 really worthy, because it showed me so many things that I can still improve on, that where I have some potential, and it helped me to tap into that potential.
Yeah.
And it was really tough. Yeah, I mean, looking back at it now, like I just did, sounds inspirational. Yeah, but I spent so many nights crying and being in fear, and like having this responsibility for my sons as well. It was a lot of pressure, and I don't want to go there again, but it was really worthy.
Thank you, for sharing this. It really speaks to me. Reminded me of this: pain is a signal, in a way. But as the Buddhists already knew, when we fight our experience, we create suffering for ourselves. And when we accept, as you said, then suddenly something new is opened up. Something can move once we accept reality as it is. And then we can ask this question: so what does it want to show me? So the crisis as a signal, and then I get into a learning mode. No, I get curious again. How could this happen? Isn't it interesting? If I'm not just like the victim of what happened, hey, maybe I need someone who else was planning, and the financing wasn't done so well. And so, and then what I heard also, you said, like, maybe I don't need to do it alone. From this ownership, responsibility, I'm the entrepreneur logic, you were running your business on the assumption that you need to do it alone in a way. You need to be able to do everything. And then to realize, okay, the crisis shows me I don't need to, or I can't, I don't need to. And so you said, like, I brought in a business partner, and then they can take care of the things that maybe are not your strongest qualities. And suddenly, out of this crisis moment emerges actually an updated version of yourself and of your business. And I mean, this is wonderful to hear this process. So it all starts with acceptance, right? And
Yes.
taking whatever happens, even if it's unpleasant or highly unpleasant, taking it as a learning opportunity. People talk a lot about that, but I mean, to actually live through it, of course, the way you did changes.
Yes, definitely. Talking about acceptance, especially the aspect for me is important of giving up hope. What am I hoping for that is still keeping me into that situation, but will not come? And accept that this hope will not be fulfilled. For me, that was the hardest part.
Yeah, I mean, that's super interesting. That's this. Sometimes people say hope is not a strategy. Yes, but I mean the psychological dimension of that somehow, if we have hope that we will be saved, it is almost like the children's perspective. No, in this we encounter a younger part in us that still hopes to be saved, and then only when we let go of this hope, we can actually take our own responsibility fully here as well. And this is a sign of maturity then. And so we get back to mature leadership and to responsibility here as well. Very interesting.
Exactly, because if you're still in the hope, you're not responsible. So it's really linked to the moment that you're saying it is like it is. What do I do now? How do I respond to that situation? Then you're getting into ownership. So if you're taking the responsibility for yourself, you're getting into ownership. This is why I said, for me, there's a little difference. And every time I think this moment is magic, even though it's really, really, really hard. And I mean, I really could use that. That's the reason why I'm pointing this out, because this aspect of giving up the hope helped me a lot during my last year's development. Because on a regular time, I'm asking myself, where do I still hope something happens that's not gonna happen? And this helped me do all of the change that happened during the last years, and even heal some of my hardest childhood wounds. Because like my second crisis was not that hard, but my second crisis was just 1.5 years away, when I found myself filling a lot of roles and responsibilities and positions, and really, really, really nice positions. And I felt that I'm running and running and running and that my fuel is going down. And then I said, okay, why do I do this? What is pushing me to take all those responsibilities and all those roles? What is there? And then by looking at this and by asking my question, what do I hope for? I found that I'm still hoping for the recognition of my mother and father saying, oh, you're doing such a good job. And we are so happy that you are here. We are so proud of you. Actually, I was hoping for the word, I am so proud of you, basically from my mother. And at some point when I realized that, and by understanding my relationship with my mother and understanding my mother, yeah, I knew this is not gonna happen. This is not gonna happen. And it was such a sad, really sad moment to realize that's not going to happen. But at the same moment, I felt that from now on, I can really decide what I'm doing and what not. And
Yeah.
that's always like this. You have both parts in it. And this is why I realized giving up hope,
Mm.
where hope is not helpful anymore, is really, really essential.
And that's very interesting and very, deep, and probably speaks to a lot of people listening, and to me personally as well. I think it's very often the case that we are still acting out some old scripts from our childhood. So what motivates us in business, and probably many entrepreneurs have that as well, is indeed also in need of for recognition, right? Sometimes also safety. I want the money, so I'm safe, or I want the money, so I'm autonomous, or I want great success, then I will get recognition. And often it's kind of out of a lack of inner resourcing at that place. And so you actually hope still from basically getting the love or the pride, the recognition from your father or your mother, right? So to ask yourself this question, what do I'm still hoping here for to happen? So to be saved by something from the outside, right? It sounds a bit stark when you said, so let go of all hope, the hope destroying, hope busting consigliere. But I mean, on the other side of this actually waits a new form of inner freedom and autonomy. So that allows you to take by choice ownership and responsibility and not be enmeshed in some old programming, right? So I think this
Yeah,
has many
exactly.
applications and is very useful for all of us to really look at this.
And you know what is the most interesting thing? I can remember that this actually happened last year in November, so it's not too old. Yeah, that experience and the insights. And I had to get older than 40 to have those thoughts. And I can remember it was a day in November last year when I had that thought. And by coincidence, on the next weekend, we visited my parents. And during the week, I had this moment where I gave up hope. And at that weekend, at that visit, it was the first time that my mother was talking to me in the way I always wished for. So the moment I had given up hope was the signal or the impulse the system needed to change something. And I think that's so powerful, yeah, to have that small but really big thing at the same time in mind. And this helped me a lot in opening up then this experience.
Yeah, this is so crazy how this works systemically, as you say, unconsciously. Sometimes we effort so much in wanting to change other people, right? Especially those closest to us. And once we give up because something in us has shifted, we have clarified something inside of ourselves, for example, or integrated something, suddenly the system shifts. The whole time we were fighting for 40 years to get something, the pride of the mother, the love of the father, whatever. And suddenly when we give up all hope, we get it. This is paradoxical how this works systemically, you know?
Yeah.
So, this is builds on what we believe also at Evolute Institute, that actually the real change starts always within and from within. And when we change, then the systems can change. So on the personal level, but also on an organizational level or on a societal level. I think your example is great.
Talking in the concept that I introduced, yeah, like this. If I change something in my space, I will change the things that I put into our space that we share. So the space between us changes. And if the other one is interested in creating that space, that relationship as well, he or she will realize there's a change. And then this will be an impulse for them to think about themselves and saying, okay, something changed. What can I do to react on that change? Yeah. And then they put something different into this common space that's in between us. And this is why I love this concept of those spaces or rooms, as I said, yeah, because it's not that esoteric anymore. If I'm looking at it like that, it's just a matter of fact. It's systemic.
Yeah, that's all very interesting. We have completed almost like an hour now of conversation. And often I ask, is there a piece of advice you would give people who are struggling with transition moments or crisis moments or being at crossroads? Is it just like give up hope and everything will develop wonderfully after that? Or how would you think about giving advice to a younger version of yourself or to someone else who's struggling, facing a crisis moment or something like that?
Yeah, I would never ever say give up hope. This would not be my advice because I believe that at some points of time, it's good to have some hope. And it's also reasonable to have some hope because there is a likelihood that it's coming. What I'm saying is give up hope when the likelihood of the event is 0. This is basically what I'm saying, but that's not my advice.
Mm-hmm.
The advice I would give to my younger self is trust the process. It happens when it happens, and everything that's meant for you will come to you, and trust it. Like this trust would have saved me a lot of anxiety and fears and fighting and a lot of pain that's just not needed if you trust. Yeah. And what I would also give to my younger self is be gentle with yourself in that process, because I had been really, 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 really hard to myself, really unnecessary hard. But at the same time, my brain is saying my younger self would not listen because you cannot feel it without really experiencing it. And if you would ask me, someone who's struggling, yeah, what's my advice to them? I would really say, think about acceptance. Really ask yourself the questions: what do I have to accept that I'm not accepting yet? Why am I fighting something that's already true? This is from my perspective what change is all about, and what healing is all about, and what resilience also is about. Because I realized, and this was another shift. I realized that for a lot of years I was fighting the negative emotions, and I said, I want to avoid anger. I want to avoid anxiety. I want to avoid all the negative emotions. Yeah, because they are not giving me a good feeling, of course. And I can always really remember the situations when I had been there. There was a moment when I had been in my sabbatical and I read all my diaries and my thoughts from the last years that I had been writing, and I realized that that fighting of negative emotions, and I was like, yeah, but that's life too. Feeling a positive emotion gives me the feeling of being alive, and feeling a negative emotion gives me the feeling of being alive as well. And for me, connection was always important. And what I realized is that no matter what the emotion is, any kind of emotion is part of the game and is helping me to connect. Because if someone is really sad and I can feel his or her grief and step into that or into my grief, and we are in grief together, that's something really, 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 really connecting. I'm not saying we should do it all the time, but I'm saying there's everything I ever hoped for in this connection that can also arise from a negative emotion. And that was the moment of time when I said, accept that every emotion is part of the game. That changed everything for me.
Might even go as far as to say it's the framing of emotions as negative or positive is probably part of the issue. And as you said, like unpleasant emotions, like don't feel good. that's actually what we often then avoid. But it can be very beneficial, especially when we bring this into a shared space. So if we feel the emotion together, as you said. And in our work, of the work we do in Evolut Institute, it's this movement towards acceptance is a crucial one. And then finding solace, comfort, and new energy in this shared emotional space, then it's very important for people's processes now to be able to move forward, to develop into new spaces. Because often in these places, we are alone. So we hold the emotions alone. That's why actually we can't accept them, want to get away from them, because it's hard for us to trust enough to bring it into relationality, into relationship. And if we allow this in the right conditions, the right space, the right support, then this will move a lot and help us with everything that we discussed today, the positive effects of acceptance then. And building more maturity personally and in our leadership roles, that can be very powerful. I was also just joking and provoking you a bit when I said, like, what do you tell people? Give up hope? No, of course not. So trust the process and move towards acceptance. I think those are very valuable pieces of advice. And together with our kind of conversation about responsibility, ownership, and so on, I think we have like really touched a lot of interesting ground today. And we could like talk on for hours, I think, but maybe we wrap it up now. Is there anything that you feel that wasn't mentioned that would be really valuable to add to our conversation to make it, as we say in German, more round? So to give us a feeling of completion. Is there anything that you would like to mention, Ed?
Actually, I think we've touched a lot of the things. I would really end with the strong, what is the word, plaidoyer?
Appeal to, I don't know, yeah.
Understanding the power of emotions. I think we talked about it, and for me, it's such a pity that we're still in this mode of emotions have nothing to do in business. And I think that is not leading us to where we need to go, because we are humans. There are always emotions, and understanding the messages, understanding the dynamics, and integrating those dynamics into every dimension of our life, including business, is the potential that is untapped from my perspective.
Nothing to add. I would say if people wonder how can they get in touch with you, how can they learn more about you and your work, where should they go to? Where would you point them?
Definitely to my LinkedIn page. So you can find me on LinkedIn, and I have all the relevant content pieces linked there, and I'm pretty active there. So if you want to get in contact, LinkedIn is the best way.
Otherwise, we mentioned, of course, I potentials, not high potentials, but I potentials if you're looking for an executive.
Of course, yeah, that would be.
Of course.
Indeed. Yeah.
Yeah, that was wonderful. Thank you very much, Constanze, for sharing your insight, your wisdom, also your personal path and experiences. I was touched and learned a lot, and I hope our audience as well. And I think we will have to continue the conversation. There are so many things we did not touch, we could have touched. So I think there will be a round 2 at some point.
We will. It was my pleasure. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Constanze. Have a good day.
Bye.
Thanks so much for listening to Inner Pioneers. If you found this conversation meaningful, don't forget to subscribe and share it with someone you care about. Want to go deeper? Visit evolut-institute.com. Until then, keep pioneering, one step at a time.